name is Laszlo Pinter, and I would like to welcome Meuleman to see you. As you noticed, we sent out the announcement really last minute, so we recognized we had an opportunity on Sunday evening, late hours, and we grabbed that. I won't do a long introduction, but Louis will be talking about an orphan. That orphan is a dimension.
Which needs parents.
Sorry?
Which needs new parents.
It needs new parents, needs more attention. The governance dimension of sustainable development is something that is critical, but it has been left off at certain times. Certainly of the simplified three dimensions that dominate public discourse, and we know that it's a dimension that is becoming exceedingly critical, especially now as we realize that the challenges we are facing are complex, they are multi-scale, and they need the coordination of actors collaborating on those different levels. And I think metagovernance, which is an idea that Louis has fostered and spinned, that is going to be very interesting from that point of view. And he's both an academic and he has an important role at the European Commission as the coordinator of the European semester. So maybe if you can say that right. So if you can kind of also weave a little bit of that into your talk.
I did.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. I asked him for a coffee and I got students. That's much better. So my name is Meuleman. I'm a biologist, environmental biologist, but immediately started working in environmental policy making on the regional level, the national level, and the national level in the Netherlands. And then I got so many questions I wanted to answer that I did a PhD 8 years ago, finished on the tensions within ministries between hierarchical steering and their instrument toolbox and network steering, the more informal forms, and the markets-based instruments, popularity. And it was all a mess, so I thought I needed to do a PhD on that. When I was in my confusion phase, after 1.5 years, you need to be in a complete confusion phase. Then I discovered that there was a guy who had already framed what I thought would be the solution. It's the term metagovernance. I will explain a bit about that, a little bit about the link to sustainable development. Very important, not only because sustainable development, this is the year of the Sustainable Development Goals, and we know that the goals are more or less chosen, picked, and the next step would be implementing them. So the governance question becomes very, very important. Yesterday I was in Brussels at a meeting where Future Urge, this research consortium, presented their strategic research agenda 2014, and there's a lot of governance questions in also. So I call myself a reflexive practitioner. So I work, let's say, for 200% in the Commission, and the other time I do small things at several universities, try to keep publishing and try to reflecting on my work. So this was a big opportunity also to get also reflections from you again. My main task in the European Commission is coordinating the efforts of Director General Environment in greening the European economy. And that's the process, it's in fact an economic governance process, which is called the European semester. And we are with a big team in this environment trying to formulate recommendations to all the member states on improving their economic governance and jobs dimension, but also on environmental taxation, for which we had a seminar this morning at several ministries and stakeholders here in Budapest. I have a too long PowerPoint, I could not really do, but so I will skip some things, but then you will get the PowerPoint that will have the whole story. So what I will discuss is what is governance, then differences between three ideal, typical governance styles, tensions, how you can combine them in a productive way, the short example on sustainable development, and a bit longer example on greening the European semester. that is my own reflection on my own work at the moment, the process I'm doing. So, what is governance? You know, there are many, many definitions and words popping up when you talk about governance. These are only some of them, but if you are structured, you can structure them in 3 groups. And then you have 3 approaches to governance, or 3 classical styles of governance. Hierarchical governance, the classical style of administration, network governance, and market governance as the non-hierarchical alternatives, which work very differently. But we need to start with a definition, and there are lots of definitions of what governance is, because governance is usually a normative concept, so there are certain convictions, values behind it, and then people come with a definition. Good governance, the World Bank was of course a pleonasm, but it has also some values of market governance in it, very much. So, this would be my definition, more or less. Governance is the totality of interactions in which governments, other public organizations, private companies, and civil society participate in one way or another, but with the aim to solve public challenges and to create opportunities. In fact, this should then be called public governance, because of the type of challenges I link it with. Another definition which is close: governance is a collection of normative insights about the organization of influence, steering, power, checks and balances in societies. It's a very good one, I think, because it emphasizes the normative dimension. Okay, let's look at the 3 styles of governance that you can. I looked in my PhD at many, many, many different governance styles: adaptive governance, reflexive governance, whatever governance. But you could always bring them back to 3 ideal types. Ideal types not in the sense that they are ideal, but in the sense Max Weber used them as a construct to better investigate what's happening. So hierarchical governance, the classical style, it's governance from the top downwards, machine organization, detailed instructions, very detailed division of tasks in an organization and in society. It's very weak in trust and empathy. It's also not very innovative. So this is a typical hierarchical thing. In the organization I work is the European Commission, so we have a Director General, and I would be somewhere here in between. So it's clean and lonely at the top. I have 2 short video clips from this famous Yes Minister BBC series, which is 25 years old, I think, more or less, but still very, very accurate. Who knows Yes Minister? I mean, the new generation. So, the first clip is about how the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Administrative Affairs explains to the assistant of the minister, the younger guy, why decentralization is really a bad idea. So this is, from a hierarchical point of view, decentralization to regions is a very stupid idea. Let's see if it works now.
Because, Bernard, once you create genuinely democratic local communities, it won't stop there. Will it? Of course it won't. You see, once they get established, they'll insist on more power. And the politicians will be too frightened to withhold them, so you'll get regional government. Would that matter? Don't sit down. Bernard, what happens at the moment if there is some vacant land? It'll say Nottingham, and there are rival proposals for its use, a hospital, a college, or an airport.
Well, we set up an interdepartmental committee. Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Transport, Treasury, Environment. Ask for papers, hold meetings, propose, discuss, revise, report back, redraft, and all things.
Precisely. Months of fruitful work. Leading to a mature and responsible conclusion. But if you have regional government, they decide it all in Nottingham. Probably in a couple of meetings, complete out.
It is their city.
And what happens to us?
Much less work.
Yes, much less work. So little that ministers might almost be able to do it on their own. So we have much less power.
Well, I don't know whether whether I really want power.
Bernard, if the right people don't have power, do you know what happens? The wrong people get it. Politicians, councillors, ordinary voters.
But aren't they supposed to in a democracy?
This is a British democracy.
Okay, but the other style is also funny. Market governance is very popular in Western and Anglo-Saxon countries and in some Western countries. It was the idea that you could run a government and make policies as if government was a business. Same things. I was a young manager in a regional government in the Netherlands in the late 1980s, and we all had to read a book which was called The Business Like Civil Servant or something, Business Manager, and we could calculate the cost of every policy paper we wrote, and it was very much on cost and on efficiency and so on. That's good, but going for more flexibility and decentralization also and outsourcing means also less stability and so on. And the example I will show you is a real life one. It's about the most efficient hospital in the UK. It's a completely new hospital, and you can see why it is so efficient. The minister is visiting the
And this is Jane Theatre.
How much do all this cost?
Together with radiotherapy and intensive care, £2.25 million.
Isn't it appalling that it's not being used?
Oh no, a very good thing in some ways. It prolongs its life, cuts down life.
no patients in the hospital.
No, but the essential work of the hospital still has to go on.
Are patients the essential work of the hospital?
Running an organisation of 500 people is a big job, Minister.
But if they weren't here, they wouldn't be here.
What?
No, this is what you see won't do. Either you must get some patients into this hospital, or I should close.
Yes, well, Minister, in the course of time...
No, not in the course of time, Mrs. Rogers. Now, get rid of 300 of your people, get some doctors and nurses, and get some patients.
Now look here, without those 300 people, this hospital just wouldn't function.
No, you think it's functioning now?
Minister, it's one of the best run hospitals in the country. It's got a Florence Nightingale award.
What praise that?
It's won by the most hygienic hospital in the area.
No, Mrs. Rogers, I said my last word. 300 staff must go.
You mean 300 jobs lost?
We couldn't do any serious surgery with just a skeleton medical staff.
Well, don't do any serious surgery. I don't care if you do varicose veins, hernias, and pile. Do something.
Do you mean 300 jobs lost?
Yes, I do, Mr. Fraser. A hospital's not a source of employment. It is a place for healing of the sick.
Well, it's a source of employment for my members. And you want to put them out of work, do you? Is that what you call a compassionate society?
I'd rather be compassionate to patients than to your members.
Right. We'll come out on strike.
No. Do. What's the matter? Who can it harm? Do, please. Come out on strike. The sooner the better. And take the administrators with you while you're at it. And sort of play. Well,
Yeah, this market governance has led to some excesses, very efficient organizations who forget what their main purpose is. And okay, and the third style is the network governance style, very popular among political scientists, based on network principles and values, connecting people, partnerships, trust and empathy, consensus building, and this has also its downsides. But what we see is at the moment there are three styles out there, and they are in all kinds of combinations. And these combinations can be fruitful, but also mutually undermining. When I found in my PhD, and later even more of them, found about 35 differences between these three styles. So if you further pull them outside, then you can see that they have a different idea on what's the definition of strategy, on the role of government, on the motives of the public sector, and so on. So for each of these issues, you can give a hierarchical network or market answer, which is very different. And I want to give you a few examples. The first is that theoretical background is very different. Hierarchical governance and market governance are both rational styles, based on rational world theory. in terms of science, positivist, more or less, approaches. Whereas network governance allows much more uncertainty, unpredictability, so it's close to social constructivism, we could say. And of course, there's a lot to say for rational thinking, although we know that most people. This morning we had this meeting with a lot of scientists, also 3 professors, economics, a lot of economics-ists, and somebody asked, is man rational? And nobody, it's meanwhile not politically correct anymore to say, yes, men are rational because we can calculate with rational people and we cannot calculate in our models with non-rational people. So things are changing, but still, you know, people are only to a very limited extent rational. This is from the book of Kahneman. What's this say? You can read. ABC. Okay. And this is it 12, 13, 14, or is it 12B 14? Because what we do very quickly, we associate, and this is exactly the same as that, which means we are completely irrational. So the last one among you thought we are rational. We have certain rationalities. And this is from this famous book of Kahneman about 2 systems of thinking. Very useful. Okay, difference between the 3 styles on the roles of government. Is government somewhere above society, ruling society? Is it the partner? Is it the service deliverer? Just merely that. And of course, the confusion is that many politicians these days think hierarchically, speak the partnership language, and always choose market instruments as solutions. Politicians from all parties. How do you look at other actors? Are they subjects or citizens as only voters? Or are they partners? Or are they clients and customers? And with this popularity of market governance, the term clients and customers came up very much for public services. Before these public services then, of course, became privatized. Mintzberg distinguished a number of strategy types, and you can see that hierarchical governance is, if you ask somebody who thinks like that, what is a strategy? It's about planning and design, 23 steps, and very predictable, which is very good if you plan the building of a school or whatever, but this is more like dealing with uncertainty. So strategy is learning and dealing with uncertainty, and this is strategy is getting the best competitive position. Another example, very different. Hierarchy says communication is giving information, is one direction. That is networks more about organizing dialogues, and here this is more like about marketing. Roles of knowledge, very important. Usable knowledge is authoritative, so you have a big professor or a big institute who delivers the right knowledge. Usable knowledge is broadly accepted, so this is joint fact-finding in a network approach. And in market governance, it's just a good you can buy for the best price. And if you don't like knowledge, if you don't like a study report, for example, I'm now talking from a government perspective, then of course you can undermine the authority of the people who brought the news or who made the study. Or you can undermine the trust on this acceptance. Or you can say that this was not a good price-quality relationship. In Yes Minister, we don't have time for that. There's also a method in 4 steps to undermine every study report that comes to government, and sort of many steps that without even reading it, you can undermine any study report. I can send you the link because it's also on YouTube somewhere. It's very funny. Then, character of relationships, dependency, interdependency, mutual dependency or independency. And this is also an important one, about relational values. How do I value the value of other people? Do I dislike the value of other people and try to destroy them? Am I indifferent? I don't care as long as they don't bother me. Or am I tolerant? Or even pluralist? I feel co-responsible for protecting other people's values. And this also makes a big difference if the society or the country in which you work is more like this or that, then the policies you develop also for sustainable development should in one way relate to that, to these values. This is also a nice one, the suitability for different problem types. Of course, when there is a crisis, it's good to have a command center, a central command. And if you have a wicked problem, a complex problem, it's very important to start maybe with a network governance approach, to involve many actors with all their expertise. And it would be stupid to apply a network governance approach for very simple routine questions where efficiency is the best thing. The thing is, of course, that problems don't exist, they are social constructions, says this believer in social constructivism. And also from my own practice in government, politicians frame problems. And sometimes if the problem as it is framed is not solvable because of a lot of opposition, you can just reframe the problem into a different one. A good example is climate change. You can frame it as a very complex, wicked problem with many dimensions and many relations. Or you can frame it like a global disaster, which is what the majority of the climate experts do. The advantage of framing it as a global disaster is that you then can call for legally binding global solutions with a kind of climate police or things like that. And you centralize all the research money on the global level. So I don't take a position, I'm not officially, but I think this is the last one, different institutional logics. How do you think about how, so here in hierarchy it's more like centralized institutions based on authority. In network governance you have informal institutions. And this is more like contracts, public-private partnerships and other hybrid organizations. And if you ask somebody who thinks in a traditional hierarchical way, what is the best solution for a problem? My colleagues in the European Commission who are lawyers, they will of course say the best solution for any problem is a new law, a new directive. And in network governance, it's much more consensus, confidence, voluntary agreements, and this is like contracts, outsourcing, and these things. Voluntary agreements could be with both. Good. The last one, conflict handling. You go to the judge, the court, authoritative, you ask for a mediator in network governance, or you just allow competition. Okay, so if you then have these three different approaches with very different ideas about reality and about what right solutions for problems are, then there are of course tensions. There are three types of tensions. The first is that each style has its typical weakness. Of course we know that hierarchy leads to bureaucracy, to red tape, and even to abuse of power maybe. Market governance can have all the failures of real markets. And it could also lead to corruption because money is an important thing. Network governance can lead to endless talks, no decisions at all. And it's also very sensitive to manipulation. These are weaknesses. The second thing is the styles can undermine each other. If you, for example, believe that government should rule society, then you cannot at the same time believe that government should be a partner in society, a special partner, and that's conflicting. Or this is more like a trade-off between reliability or flexibility. You cannot have both 100% each. Or if you think that trust is important in solving a societal problem, then you can destroy this trust with a PR campaign, informing people in a way that they would change their behavior, which we do like to use a lot in environmental politics. And then I already gave the example of legally binding agreements on climate or a more pluralist approach. Okay, and the third problem is that each of these styles is so attractive for some people that they have become believers, complete believers that this governance style is the best solution for everything. Maslow already said if you only have a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And that's very true. So if you think like a network governance approach, that is the best, you want to solve every problem with dialogues and stakeholder meetings, even if you just, by issuing a simple rule, could solve the issue. You find this also in, let's say, default national styles. In Germany and France, in Southern Europe, Eastern Europe also to quite an extent, the Pavlov style is hierarchical governance. In the Netherlands and Scandinavia, it's the network governance style. We don't like, I'm Dutch, so we don't like hierarchy, we don't like bosses, everybody should be equal, and we work very much on trust and stakeholder participation. And then in the UK, Ireland, USA, Australia, New Zealand, market governance is very popular in the concept of the public service model. So government is just a service provider. And you see this also, of course, on the street in different types of traffic signs. The right one I can make a bit bigger. This is self-regulation in the market style, because this is a roundabout with 3 other roundabouts, 5 other roundabouts in it. It's the summum of self-regulation. I live in Belgium, which is a very complex country because it's just between the north and the south, so it's a cultural watershed. Is there somebody from Belgium here? I always have to take care if I make jokes about Belgium as being in Dutch. No, but it's a very interesting country. There's a lot of artists like Magritte play with the uncertainty in the country and with surrealism. And you see very strange and very many traffic signs to reduce uncertainty in Belgium on the street. And this is one of the best. And this means that also I have a green card, for example. So they like to explain everything, even if it might be evident, but you never know. But that's important. In my PhD, I compared the same policy case on soil protection in England, Netherlands, Germany, and European Commission. But this England, Netherlands, Germany, you saw exactly that the policymakers first tried the default style, the national default style. In the end, because they were clever, they had to switch to something else sometimes. Okay, solution. Metagovernance is a concept framed by Jessup. It's designing and managing situationally appropriate combinations of hierarchical network and market governance. So you look at the type of problem, the whole situation, the possibilities that are there, and then you try to find a mix which does not have these inherent tensions too much. And what I found after interviewing a lot of successful managers was that, so the question is, does it tackle the 3 problems? The weaknesses, yes, because you can compensate the weakness of network governance, that there is no conclusion and endless thought, by introducing some rules of the meetings, some rules of conclusions from hierarchical thinking, and some efficiency maybe also from marketing. You can prevent in a mixture the undermining combinations and its belief system, take the cultural dimension into account and strive for compatibility of different values. So you don't destroy opposing values, but try to make them compatible in some way. And then there are 3 strategies. The first is combining, the second is switching from network to hierarchy when it is needed, when there's a big crisis or a problem. And the third is to maintain, to do things, small things to keep the main style, the combination you have picked alive. But this is often done intuitively by people in charge of complex policy issues. They don't call themselves metagovernance, but there seem to be some preconditions. It's the political administrative culture. Are you open to do something new or not? The personal conviction of the political boss, the minister. I did a project in the Environment Ministry in the Netherlands for 2.5 years on stimulating interactive policy making, so stakeholder participation, and then suddenly we got a new minister who said this is complete nonsense, I'm the boss, he told all directors that my project was completely stupid, so I had to stop with that. Societal expectations, is there any pressure from society to be involved or not? The culture of your own organization, even several ministries in one country may have a different organizational culture, and then how the problem is framed. Okay. There is no disagreement, I think, on metagovernance among academics. Jessup started with it. There were some other books already on the three governance styles and how they related to each other without this concept of metagovernance. When I started my PhD in 2004, the term metagovernance got only 35 hits, and a few years later it was 15,000 or something. But in principle there are two. I did my PhD in 2008, finished it. There are two schools of thought. The first is a kind of normative metagovernance. You take one style, for example, network governance, and see how you can make that style function better with the help of the other two styles, elements from that. This is the style popular in Denmark, so Torfing are working this way. The reason why they do that is that Denmark is a network governance country, and they also only do research on wicked type problems where network governance is per definition important. My favorite approach would be not normative. I don't choose a style a priori. And then I had a discussion with Jacob Torfing in Roskilde University to see how we can reconcile this. And then he said, okay, let's call the way we are doing it first order metagovernance because they think they are the first. So that's why my style approach is now called second order metagovernance. And I published this discussion in a book edited by Jacob Torfing. But in this approach, there are more and more people trying things, doing research, and presenting something. Let me see. Where I got now, this is wrapping up on the main story. Dealing with complex problems requires understanding of social systems. Governance is about how of decision making. It's not about what, but about how. And is normative. There's a competition of three styles, which are very different. They have each their weaknesses, they can undermine each other, they can be addictive, and therefore metagovernance or metagovernance attitude is kind of a bird's eye view on governance, which is as such not normative. The problem is when I defended my PhD thesis in Rotterdam, Erasmus University, it was not so easy because all professors there are strong network believers. They even, if they see hierarchy or power play in a case, they frame it then as power networks, in order to stay into their own frame, of course. But when I tried to defend it, one of the professors asked me, metagovernance, are you God? Do you think you're God, that you can be as a bird's eye perspective above all these things? No, I'm not God, but I think you can, if you are aware of your own preference, which my inherent preference is network governance, but I learn to accept the value of the other styles, then you can do a lot. Okay, then I have two examples, but first are there questions on this? Do you recognize this or not? Do you maybe disagree, I hope?
I'm just wondering, I mean,
good.
I don't know this concept, but I'm wondering whether there's, if you have a critique that it has some tendency towards the hierarchical governance because there has to be someone who will decide what kind of mix is appropriate. And so, unless there's some, how do you work out who that is? Is it the person at the top?
No, in some of the literature on metagovernance, people write that metagovernance is back to hierarchy, is reinventing the state because the non-hierarchical styles, new public management, new public governance, were a bit away from the state. The state was bad, it should be small, somewhere around there. I don't think I do really take that position, but because in my view, a meta-governor can be everybody, also in an NGO or in a business, who has to organize some complex process. And then you have to look what are your implicit preferences and what are the values and the preferences in the world around you. So it's not per definition state central, but I do give state a role because the state can do certain things which other actors cannot do. So it's useful to keep them in, I would say. Yes, please.
I was also wondering, I mean, what you've given is very interesting. It's more like a structural sort of analysis, which is good. I was also wondering that if you develop the work in using agents, like the people in these organizations and the flow of information. Because I always feel that when we do agent structure debates or discussions, we always forget the flow of information, because that's and the processing thereof. You mentioned that
in the way the invisible flow of information that you should not forget. Like my wife always says that I forget the power dimension.
I mean, I only just started thinking about this. The way I would frame it at very early stages, that each form of governance is creating a certain kind of information, and that information is proliferating through their networks. But I also believe that there is an objective reality out there, and there's subjective interpretations of that objective reality. Even if we don't necessarily understand it, climate change, for example, it's happening. We're inferring it differently, but it's there. So how does that sort of play out?
Maybe I can show it, explain it on the example of the European semester, my own work at the moment. That sustainable development is, per definition, I would say, a very complex challenge. It's multi-level, multi-sector, multi-actor. So you would need to use at least some characteristics of network governance. But even management of complex problems requires some structure and rules. For example, for business, a level playing field in different parts of the world, of different countries. So you also need something from there. And also you need some efficiency. And sometimes market ideas need competition, awards, whatever kind of things. But I think, so for implementing, for example, these sustainable development goals, it will also be a mix of this, which will be different in each country, I think, based on what is the default style, and you hope to find some common ground. But I think in the future it will be very difficult to get to legally binding global agreements on any issue. So it's just not accepted anymore, which does not mean that things are not going well, like China wants to do the things in their own way, that maybe in some ways they are far more advanced than some Western countries. So I didn't have time to really reflect on this a bit. I took a little bit time to reflect on the European semester. So I'm the process manager. I don't have hierarchical power in the European Commission, but I'm process manager for reading the European semester. Just a short repetition: European Union, three main institutions, the Council or the Member States, the Commission and the Parliament, and in some way decisions are taken and then they will be implemented by the Council and the Commission, not by the Parliament. That's the main structure in which we work. We have this annual governance cycle based on the 10-year plan, the Europe 2020 strategy, which starts in November. The semester is a strange term because it suggests 6 months. It is in fact 8 months from November to June, and really in fact it is a whole year cycle of discussion and debate. It starts with the presentation of a kind of analysis of the state of the economy in the EU, and then in March for each of the 28 countries an analytical document is presented. We are working on it now. The Commission is very creative in abbreviations. They are called SADs, and it's was meant to mean good news, because we have a new Commission and they want to do everything different, of course. But they came with SADs, and then every member state has to deliver a national reform program, update of their economic and Jobs, Growth and Jobs program in April. Then the Commission proposes for each country 5 to 7 recommendations on all kind of issues. So environmental issues are not always in for each country, because it could be about pension systems or education, whatever. Everything that is microeconomically relevant. So, and these are proposed by the European Commission and then adopted by the European Council, by the heads of states. So in the end, the member states give recommendations to each other. It's not the Commission anymore. And then there are all kind of meetings with the member states, ongoing dialogue, seminars like we had this morning one, and all kind of studies. Well, these are some steps, it's not so relevant here. Okay, so how did I apply? I didn't do it that consciously, but now then I try to reflect on what I'm doing. In the first, I would say we have like 17 people in DG Environment who are in all the country teams. There are 28 country teams, which means every month within the European Commission, and all the relevant directorates general are represented there. So we have big teams, 25 people sometimes. So there are 17 people in our club who give the inputs on greening the economy, and then we have like 10 people in our technical units, water, air, and waste, and all these things, who give us the data, the economic relevance of their policies. So it's quite a big club, all part-timers, in fact, on this. So the first step, the analysis of your governance environment. Internal, within the Commission. And we know the Commission is highly professional, which means highly educated people, quite clever people sometimes. International organization, it's very much evidence-driven. We do have a very strong internal impact assessment system, which is in fact a sustainability impact assessment system. For each policy or legal proposal, we have to do an impact assessment and looking at environment, social, and economic impacts. We have a high esprit de corps, this strong feeling within the Commission that we need to speak with one voice. So, like this morning, I say, yes, I'm from DG Environment, but I will speak on behalf of the Commission. I try. Some people have analyzed it as that the Commission looks like a German-French ministry, combination of that, very hierarchical in structure and processes, which means clear responsibilities and fast decision making. I'm so happy to work in that clear organization, because only from clear situations you can start being free. And in the Netherlands there is this unfreeness, this being hostage by the fact that everybody is always involved in everything. And in the ministries you only have these project groups, and you never know who's really responsible for anything. It's so tired. I'm so happy I'm not going back to the so this is the basic structure, hierarchy. But networking, Commission officers are highly trained. There's a professional network culture, like in any professional organization, of some respect and also independency. A simple desk officer, lowest level, can have a huge responsibility in the European Commission, because also we are a small organization. And same number of civil servants of a city like Amsterdam. And we use extensive public consultations for each new policy proposal. And market governance came in a bit when there was a British commissioner, Neil Kinnock, and so then efficiency thinking, also slimming down the organization, and the better regulation agenda, again now very popular, are signs of that. That's internal. External, in the analysis of the governance environment, well, the greening of the semester, we managed to get it often on the agenda of the Environment Council, so the environment ministries. In most member states, there are very different opinions on greening the economy between environment and finance and economics ministries. There are different, as I said, different preferred typical solutions in different member states. The European Parliament is highly interested in this whole process of greening the economy. national NGOs. They're starting to give advice, and they also organize conferences. We involve them as much as possible. The business world is divided, some pro, some anti, and the academic world is not really involved in this whole process, except from, I mean, not in terms of political science or administration or governance science. Of course, we see economists and all kinds of specialists in this process. Okay, so what is the type of problem would be the next question. Well, it's a high complex issue, it's politically very sensitive. It's playing, I mean, for us, environment, we are compared in the pecking order of the European Commission, we are very much down. You're the little mouse, and above there you have these big elephants of economics, financial, tax, employment. So we are not very strong. And we are playing, in fact, by putting so much emphasis now on greening the economy. In fact, we are playing with the crown jewels of the Commission, the hardcore economic and financial stuff. And it's not always liked, of course, so we have to be very clever. There are many actors with different interests, internally and externally, and like I said, we are not one of the strongest players. So, all in all, I thought when I was asked to start organizing this process in DG Environment, we need to have at least a very strong network approach. Because we cannot do power play, we have convincing power play, we should develop that. So a strong focus also on alliance building, building trust. I sometimes say we play the transparency game. I'm just an opportunist in that, because I know it's useful to be transparent and reliable, and our message is that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. Part of it is we should be visible in all these country teams every month. We are always there. DG Environment is always there, and we listen to discussions that are not interesting for us, because that's also the way to start a relationship with the enemy or the opponents. Be inclusive. We have, I took the initiative for an expert group in all the member states' environment ministries on greening the economy, and they all come. Last week we had a meeting, all member states are coming, and in this, being inclusive, I always invite all Commission colleagues from the different DGs, or ministries, you could say. So to show we have nothing to hide, just come along, maybe you have something to learn even. And they do. Last week there were 8 different Commission services the Director General represented in the meeting. We also invite them all, the economics and financial colleagues, always to study steering groups and stuff. We say it's not DG Environment, it's European Commission studies. We also include NGOs, and then we try to find synergy topics. And that's not so difficult. There's so many linkages between the environment or the circular economy or resource efficiency with all these different other policy fields. The yellow parts are, I'm not sure, I don't think I took that. No. For example, this is the environmental fiscal reform, the tax shift from labor to environment. On the global level, the link with the SDGs also. Impact assessment is a thing. With transport, we talk about sustainable mobility. Traffic congestion, because that's a way to get air pollution on the agenda of economic discussions. How we can help small and medium enterprises to become more resource efficient and save a lot of costs. Green jobs, green public procurement. There are many, many possibilities to create synergies and to start working together with these other colleagues, which some of our colleagues still consider the enemy, but it's not useful to do that. And if you start working with them, they start to take over. Last week I was in a meeting with one of these country teams for the semester with all the colleagues for one country, and I had proposed some recommendations on raising environmental taxes in that country, and then I was overruled by the colleagues from DG Taxation and Employment and ECFIN, because they said you should be more ambitious. that's the way I would like to have it. That they are telling me that I should do even more. And also a couple of months ago, from the colleagues of DG Enterprise, the competitiveness people, they asked me, can we have a slot of 10 minutes in your expert group to come and explain how competitiveness and environmental policy are very synergetic. It's completely new. So these are fruits from this alliances approach. And in this case, but I do try to use hierarchical governance and market governance elements as support styles. Process efficiency, keep meetings short. I have a coordinating team, and we only have weekly meetings that are usually less than 30 minutes. Just efficiency, that's part of the game. We promote market-based policy instruments. We're a bit in competition with other colleagues within the Commission. We want to be the most visible and the most solution providers. I use hierarchical governance in a way. Of course, you have to know all the written and unwritten rules of an organization before you can start playing with it. And I'm prepared to use what I can use. I'm not sharing this expert group, but I asked my director to do that. This is a way to get him involved. And I organize meetings for him at the director's level with the other services. So if I now have a problem on the lower level, my director is immediately volunteering to intervene. So I use the hierarchical power in this whole game. Investing in getting authoritative data, because hierarchical governance believers find that very important. So we really try to find the best consultancies for our studies. And then how to manage it. Okay, try to combine the styles. I switch when needed from another. Like I said, the main style is network, but I'm very much prepared to threaten to use hierarchy. Of course, I checked if I can do that in a certain case, but when it's necessary, if somebody's really blocking. And yeah, being reflexive and think about what I'm doing is important for maintenance. Let's see. This was what I did later, last night late, I think, because I already showed it a bit. This was how metagovernance is now with its first order and second order, and how some people are working on the different things. She's a PhD student in Lisbon. Michael Kuhl in Finland. Kuhl is working on things. Recently I had contact with Bob Jessup, but he is writing other very interesting books about the economic crisis. So there in some countries we are working on this lag. I don't know anybody who really took that as a research approach, and they are working on this still. So I would really hope that there will be more people trying out this. Or one research question I would have is, in my PhD I only looked at successful cases and tried to distill what happened and why they did unusual things to make it a success. It would be nice to analyze also unsuccessful policy cases and to see if maybe there was a lack of this meta-governance attitude. I think that's what I wanted to do, a bit less than an hour. Sorry that was so rushing. I tried to write a lot about these things. You will get this PowerPoint. This is a personal website of mine, myself and my wife, and we put everything we write. We even start to learn to write together at the moment. By the way, she's very much German and very much Dutch, so we have some cultural things to bridge, but it's will be very interesting. And on this Greening the European Semester, we also have a website that was part of the approach, where we have also all kinds of studies. So, questions. I think I have like 10, 12 minutes before I have to go to the airport.
Okay, thank you, Luis.
Is this very different? Is this what is different in this approach than what you have learned until now or thought about governance for sustainable development. It's just a different analytical frame, but I also use it, like I showed, for designing approaches.
It's Simon.
Thank you, Lewis, for a very good presentation. A lot of information in a very short time. So I don't really know to say anything useful, but yeah, I think this is a very interesting research approach worth thinking about using for the sustainable development goals, because there's going to be several scales and several levels involving to be successful, involving people that have different traditions of governance that speak different languages. So
I think you prevent best practices and export from one to another.
I think that's really interesting, and I've worked with civil society, and like in that work, they're changing their approach from being the traditional opponent to the government demanding this and that, from engaging as a partner. So their language is changing, and the type of governance. I'm wondering if, anyway, I think it's interesting, so I'll just stop here.
Yeah, maybe for me, one of the main things is the normative dimension of governance. The understanding that governance, that behind definitions of governance and practices, there are always some values and some traditions, and that you have to try to understand that, otherwise you will go nowhere. If you cannot connect the implementation of SDGs to what's working on a local or regional or national level, it won't work. I think that's a bit underestimated still in much of the literature. Also because people coming from an environmental perspective are often street fighters. They are warriors and they want to fight, and they want, of course, then you need a crisis to fight. If you're a firefighter, you need a fire. So they sometimes forget then to frame the challenges in a way where it is allowed that there are some things uncertain, and allowed that there are different values involved.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting to see this structure. I have a question, and I don't have very much experience in governance practice, etc. So, when you talk about the second order approach, and that it shouldn't be a priori, but more like contextual and
Situation contextual.
My question would be, can you actually just tackle already present issues with this approach, or how could you use this approach as a preventative approach when you just like react to contextual situations? Can you only react to problems, or can you also prevent problems?
Change the context. I mean, sometimes you can change the context maybe, but there's a lot of coincidence involved in policy making. I'm just thinking about writing an article about the garbage can theory and revising that. Do you know the garbage can theory? It's a strange metaphor, but it says that there are problems, there are solutions, there are actors, and they circle around somewhere in space, and sometimes they meet, then there is a window of opportunity. So your whole governance environment is not so rational, and policy making is not always these nice steps, or even a circle or iteration is much crazier sometimes. And sometimes a politician only wants something on the agenda when he or she has a solution. And then if a politician, minister comes with a solution, then we have to invent the right problem. So sometimes it's the other way around. But in this very dynamic and ambiguous environment, you sometimes can try to change the situation. I have one small anecdote on this. 12 years ago or something, I was project director in the Environment Ministry in the Netherlands, and it was, and I had to do something about land policy, but not in terms of environment. It was land ownership, buying and selling of land for building new areas or houses and stuff like that. And local authorities earned a lot of money. They could grab the land for a small price from farmers and then sell it for a lot. So but it was a big political issue, and in the Netherlands on this issue there were already 3 governments dropped. So But I thought this is a very complex problem. There are many different opinions, many stakeholders. So I will try to design a network approach in the beginning as a starting point. But that was then this same minister who destroyed my interactive policy-making process because he didn't believe in that. So he said, you have to keep your mouth shut about what we are doing, new land policy. So I had to throw away my design. And there, the interesting thing is that society didn't accept this hierarchical approach to this new policy. First, I discovered that all the experts in the ministry were already outsourced because of market governance. So I had to hire 10 consultants, the best in the country. The same guys and women were hired by the local authorities and by some other stakeholders. They started to organize conferences. I was not even allowed to go to these conferences. The minister said, no, stay in the building. You don't want to talk with everybody. But what happened was a kind of informal network process in society with all the main actors, except from us. But I could get the information back from the consultant because we had the same consultant, the 10 best people in the country. So I profited from this network approach. But from a ministry, as a ministry, I was not allowed to organize it. So the lesson here might be that if you think the issue is really that you should really focus on a network approach supported by other approaches, network governance design, then even a hierarchical minister cannot stop it. You cannot really stop a whole society. Think of the power of social media, for example. So that's it. But changing completely the context is not so good.
I have a question related to the Sustainable Development Goals that you already referred to, and that we tend to discuss as a unified concept. As something actually, I think it's extremely complex, and it's many agendas packaged together, as it will be. Even though we will use one label for it, but it will be many layers and dimensions. But and it's early days, but I'm wondering what your take on the position or the approach that the Commission would have on the SDGs. You know, what type of governance style will the Commission use to start and team that?
I think the word partnership will be an important term in that. That doesn't solve anything, but it's a starting point. What I do inside the Commission, I'm not responsible for the SDGs, but of course I know these people, and I schemed with them to get to an agreement that, of course, the SDGs will be universal, so they will also be applicable to the European Union countries, which means that the ideas on environment and economy and social issues in the SDGs cannot be very different from the mainstream economic thinking in the European Commission. So, and I call that policy coherence. And I think quite successfully I use that as leverage to green the European semester even more. So that should be considered. And my argument is then, if we don't do that at home, the EU will be not credible as negotiator in September in New York.
So maybe if right now, as you said, the SDGs are universal, but if the agenda is still unclear, this is still evolving, then there might be almost like a hierarchy of these governance approaches. So first you use, when we use a network governance style, then you don't take no responsibility, let's say. And you say, well, I'm one of the actors, we sit down, and then once the agenda becomes clearer, then other forms of governance might take.
We have to find points of crystallization of tasks and objectives. Another mantra that's circling around is implementation of the SDGs, yes, but no new tools or instruments or governance mechanisms. So I immediately said, okay, European semester is a very good monitoring tool for almost half of the SDGs, so I hope I will get that task too next year. We'll see. I almost have to go.
I'm curious to follow up on something you were saying earlier about whether you feel that there's growing pressure within the committee, or a sense away from a hierarchical model because of political developments within the EU. There's a sort of, I think, widespread perception there's a legitimacy crisis within the EU and increasing questions in a lot of EU member states in the populations about why are we still having this current institutional structure? Do we want something different? So are they feeling pressure to engage more because of that?
My colleagues who are lawyers who can only write laws, they are having problems because the new commission, especially Frans Timmermans, the first vice president, he keeps saying yesterday, I saw some tweets from Twitter that the European Commission too often starts with a legal solution and then looks at something else. So the starting point is legalist, and that will need to change. So in a few weeks I will give something like this, but then our training in teaching environment, also really for these lawyers who have to come out of the box, think out of the box, without losing the good things of the legal approach. Things have to change, I think, and if that is, and I understand that is Frans Timmermans' interpretation of better regulation, so not by definition less regulation, but before you choose for legislation as a solution, think a bit more broadly. I wrote to his assistant that it is in fact metagovernance what he said.
Okay, well, to make sure we don't miss your plane, thank you again for your
being here.
Well,
Did you have this? You want to keep this?
yeah.
Do you want to see this presentation? I can also send it. I send it. Yeah. Because
I have
it's all because
just put it on Dropbox. You're right. You got 10
see you in Brussels next time.
Jól is róla. Kétszer is fölhívtam.
Hát mert benyomom és semmit nem.
Ne ideges. Kitöröd a recent listát? Szóval csinálod tőle. Kettőtől is fölhívtam.
Kétszer hívtam.
Nyugodtan.
De akkor nem így ment, akkor az összeesés.
Türelmetlen vagy. Nyugodtan nem kell. Nem kell kapkodni. Nyugodtan. Semmi rész. Nincs. Ki lesz, hogy írjon azt? Hát akkor nem kell oda kapkodni. Ezek a prioritások. Dold vagy diktálj.
Ezt még kell csinálni.
Kettős kereszt.
Hogy kell
Ad ide.
Either the moderator, enter your moderator.
Egyszerűen, nyugodtan, lassan, nem siet sehova.
For a participant to join the meeting.
Kapcsolod a selfie-t.
When are you leaving today?
When? Doesn't matter.
Let me just see.